Just 2 days left to go in the month of August, and this is going to be the focus of today's video, to be preparing for the monthly closure on Saturday evening and going over what price that would indicate that Bitcoin is more or less preparing for an explosive Q4 of this year. And if not met, would indicate perhaps a little bit more concerning features to come in late September. Anyways, other than that, I've once again failed to figure out my damn Elgato Camlink face cam over here, so it looks like we're going to have yet another faceless video, but that's okay. And other than that, I've been asked about several times my thoughts on the new Rings of Power season. I just saw the first episode of the new season last night. Definitely a massive leg up from the prior season, significantly better. However, still some of these choices and some of the storytelling kind of leaves your head scratched, or leaves me scratching my head at least. Of course, the actor who plays Gil-galad, completely fucking wrong. I mean, Jesus Christ, that's supposed to be like one of the most badass elves of all time, and it's basically some soy boy. and then you have Galadriel, still an issue. She's supposed to be massively tall. Like, the physicality attributes are just wrong there. Anyways, I'll save that for another video. We can get into the actual analysis of the day. We'll first start off with perhaps the most simple and most important thing to be aware of for Bitcoin coming into, again, tonight's closure. I suspect that today, Friday, will massively influence tomorrow night's closure, just because it is going to be the last trading day for CME here of the month. So likely where we see things close out today is going to greatly influence Saturday's closure. But to be fair, as long as Bitcoin is above this red moving average, which is the 5 exponential moving average on the monthly time frame, I would still be more or less looking at this current price action as a trend in motion on the monthly time frame, implying that upside is still the general direction here. We can just visually back to this throughout the full history of Bitcoin. Anytime Bitcoin's been above it, generally good. Anytime Bitcoin's closed below it, that has been or marked the beginning of the end for that current cycle, and that has been fairly consistent throughout the history of Bitcoin. Yes, there are a few examples here and there where that did not hold through, but again, whenever Bitcoin's above that red moving average, generally better to be betting on long-term upside. And in this case, Bitcoin is, with just 1.5 days left to go, slightly below that red 5, which is at 61,331. So would like to see Bitcoin close above that level by Saturday night if Bitcoin is going to prove itself here. If it is very, very close, I would still kind of hold off on like a full, I guess, condemnation of that. But for right now, Bitcoin is a couple $1,000 below. So that would be cutting it a little bit too close for my liking if I do want to remain bullish. Anyways, moving on from there, I want to, as always, remind myself of where the accumulation distribution indicator is coming into the end of the monthly closure, because this one has been incredibly good at getting the overall trend shifts on the macro timeframes for Bitcoin here, yet again on the monthly. And we can see a couple things. One, coming into the last couple days of this monthly, the slope is still negative, and generally when we see negative slopes, especially in the more critical zones, those have again marked off essentially the end of that market cycle. And right now it is definitely downward slope. What would be very damning to me is that if this month does close with a negative slope, and then you see September also open with a negative slope, that would be, I think that would be very, very convincing, at least for what I'm looking at, to at minimum be looking for this market to come down and spend a lot more time consolidating at lower levels. But for right now, it's a long time left to go between now and Saturday evening. And as you can see, this current monthly is still positioned to the downside. If we have 2 months together that are downside angled, that is going to be likely good enough for me to call it. But for now, I'd still kind of at least operate with a little bit of hopium here. Anyways, going onwards and forwards from there, I do want to point out that monthly stochastic momentum is at a critical juncture here as well. It is right around the critical zone for the monthly time frame. And while it's extremely unlikely to turn up on this next month, as you can see right here, the stochastic momentum pivot is actually at 71,300. This is actually not a super concerning thing long term. Now, there's only really been a few other times that we've seen stochastic momentum pop above the critical zone and then come down below the critical zone. As you can see here, it's happened 4 times. One of these times was actually not like the other. This one specifically here in 2018. I'll explain in a moment. But of those times, those were actually all continuation signals. The most recent one was right here in June of 2021, comes below the critical critical zone, Bitcoin actually does pop back up and put in a new all-time high within the next five or 6 months from that moment. Of course, after that, that was the end of that cycle. And then the time before that, as I did say over here, 2018, a little bit different than the other ones, just because Bitcoin had already come down back below the critical zone for this cycle. So this was kind of the second time that did happen. But this one did accurately call the end of that cycle, again, in hindsight. The first time, however, that we did see for that particular iteration was, again, a continuation signal. This one in 2016 of September, actually coming after the halving of that year too. So some similarities with what we're seeing right now. And then, of course, the time before that and the only other time before that was right here, May of 2013. And as you can see, Bitcoin did continue upwards and onwards throughout that cycle for the next 5 to 6 months. So, in this case, I want to see where the stochastic momentum pivot opens up on Sunday, because not obviously, but very unlikely we see this one turn up for this month. But if Bitcoin were to, again, close above the 5 exponential and we see the momentum pivot, shift down significantly into the 60s, that would be a good indication as well that the market cycle likely does continue, again, Q4 of this year. I think that we're going to be waiting around for at least a few weeks in September. Anyways, moving from there, I do want to go over some daily price statistics. We can see that Friday slightly weighted in terms of negative closures rather than positive, but very, very close there at almost 53% of all Fridays closing negatively since 2024 began. What I'm most interested in, as always, and what has once again played out yesterday, is the average returns. The average returns for Friday on the positive side, just above 2.5%, and on the negative side, losing an average of about 2.25%. So we did see yesterday basically hold the range yet again for this. In fact, we've seen this a couple times this week already, as we typically do. And if we were to add about 2.5% to today's open, that would actually put Bitcoin, guess where? $61,000. Very interesting, because if Bitcoin were to play out that move, that obviously does bring it above the 5 exponential, or around the 5 exponential, and for the monthly, I should say, and sets things up for, again, I don't necessarily know if I'd say like a nice September, but likely a good run in the latter portion of this year. To the downside, 2.25% off of current price action puts Bitcoin back down around very low $58,000. So likely the range for today. I probably would be a little bit more biased towards the upside. And if I go over, let me see. Actually, we can just quickly go over the HPDR. We can see that the HPDR is actually holding this lower range right here. I wasn't expecting to see that. If Bitcoin does close back above 61.8, we likely will see volatility continue to contract, which would imply, Bitcoin does put another move into the low 60s, but not getting too much from this as of the current moment. What I'm actually interested in, and have been stating for the past few days here, is that still, until Bitcoin initiates another one of these entries using this very simple strategy right here, the 12-hour and the daily time frame, very similar actually for this 5 exponential average strategy, until we see Bitcoin at minimum close above the red 5, which right now on the 12-hour time frame is 59,900. I wouldn't be entertaining any sort of like prolonged or continued upside. So in this case, if we see it, if we see it close above that number in the next 4 hours and 20 minutes, actually, great number right there, then perhaps that will be the sort of early indication that Bitcoin is on its way to reclaiming that very critical number that we did look at over here on the monthly 5, again, $61,000 or so. But again, we will know in 4 hours and 20 minutes, basically. If that does happen, probably a good indication that we do see that run occur. Of course, still, it's not until Saturday evening's closure officially does happen that that I'd like to see this happen. But time is ticking here. So that would be the next sort of indication to initiate one of these or another one of these entries, which again has had the relevant statistics, as you can see down here, both on the 12-hour time frame and the daily time frame, operating quite well there. Of course, on the daily, it is a little bit higher. It is at $60,000, or just a hair above $60,000, and that likely does spark any sort of run that potentially could happen from this region as Bitcoin hangs on to the lows for dear life. So I think that will do it for today's video. Nice and short and sweet, just really a preparation for Saturday night. Although we do expect, CME would probably close somewhere around where spot price action will, and that one actually does happen tonight. So 61,350 is the magical number on CME. Just would like to see somewhere close to there. Currently, CME is actually trading like literally about $1,000 from that number, just under $60,000 right now. So definitely within the crosshairs, but it's a long day left to go. Very long day left to go. I think that there's some economic events to come later today as well. And I suppose we will have the answers and the clarity, or at least more clarity tomorrow, Saturday, and then definitely Sunday once we get spot price action closing as well. So that's going to do it for today's video. As always, I want to wish you the best of the best. Hopefully tomorrow I can figure out my damn cam link. It's driving me fucking crazy. But until then, I'd like to wish you the best. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully tomorrow.